He was just a small boy, barely 7, with eyes that always seemed to be watching the world a little differently. Life had never been easy for him. He had been born with a heart defect, something his parents worried about every single day. It wasn't the kind of thing you could ignore, and from the moment he took his first breath, his life had been full of hospital visits, medicine schedules, and constant care. Despite all of that, he had a heart full of kindness. People who knew him sometimes forgot how fragile he was because of the way he smiled, the way he laughed, even in small bursts of energy. But inside, his heart worked harder than most, pumping life through him like a drum that never got to rest. His home was small and crowded, a modest place tucked into a busy neighborhood. The walls held memories of laughter, arguments, and quiet moments of love. His mother worked long hours cleaning offices, while his father drove a bus for long stretches, barely seeing the boy during the week. The child knew he was loved, but the love was stretched thin across bills, responsibilities, and exhaustion. He had a younger sister, a curious little girl who always wanted to play, but sometimes he couldn't keep up. He would watch her spin around in the living room trying to chase her tiny feet, and then sit down chest heavy, struggling to catch his breath. Yet even when he could barely move, he would smile at her, encouraging her games, wanting her to be happy more than he wanted anything for himself. School was a challenge. Most kids didn't understand why he often stayed behind during gym, why he sometimes coughed and wheezed while running across the playground. Some of them whispered, calling him weak or fragile. But he learned early on not to respond. Instead, he focused on small victories, reading an extra book, answering a question correctly, or helping a classmate with their homework. Inside, he carried a quiet pride. He couldn't run as fast, but he could think, and he could feel, and in his mind that made him just as strong as anyone else. One cloudy afternoon, the boy found himself wandering into the small park near his home. The park wasn't much, just a patch of grass with a swing set and a slide that had seen better days. Most kids in the neighborhood didn't come here. The newer, bigger parks were better, but he liked the quiet here, the space to think, the chance to feel like he was just another kid for a few moments. He sat on a swing, the chain squeaking softly as he moved back and forth. He was alone, and that was the way he liked it most of the time. But today something felt heavier than usual. His chest ached more than usual, and a cough had been nagging him all morning. He tried to ignore it. He told himself it was nothing, just another small struggle. He swung higher, letting the wind rush past him, imagining he could fly away from all his troubles. But then suddenly his legs gave out. The world tilted. The swing moved too fast, and he felt himself collapsing onto the soft grass. The pain in his chest exploded, making it hard to breathe, and for a moment, everything went black around the edges. He tried to call out, but the sound barely left his lips. Panic bubbled up inside him, and he felt a strange mix of fear and loneliness. He knew something serious was happening, something bigger than any challenge he had faced before. That's when he noticed a shadow approaching. A man, someone he didn't know, was running across the park, his face full of concern. The stranger knelt beside him, checking him over, asking questions the boy could barely answer. He didn't recognize the man, yet in that moment the boy felt a strange sense of calm. The stranger didn't look away, didn't hesitate. He seemed to know exactly what needed to be done. The man quickly checked his pulse, saw the distress, and immediately pulled out his phone, calling for help while keeping a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. Minutes felt like hours. The boy's vision blurred, and he fought to stay conscious. He wanted to tell his parents he loved them, that he was okay, but the words got stuck in his throat. The stranger stayed with him, whispering reassurances even though he didn't know the boy personally. "You're going to be okay," he said softly, his voice steady. "Help is on the way. Just hang on." Those simple words, so ordinary in any other context, were like lifelines to the boy. Somehow he clung to them, imagining that they were shields protecting him from the pain in his chest. Soon the sound of sirens filled the air, and medical personnel rushed into the park. The stranger stepped back just enough to let them take over, but stayed close, giving a brief explanation to the paramedics before finally moving away, watching as the boy was carefully lifted onto a stretcher. In the ambulance, as the boy drifted in and out of consciousness, he caught a glimpse of the stranger standing on the sidewalk, turning to leave without asking for anything in return. The boy wanted to call out to thank him properly, but the words wouldn't come. All he could do was watch as the man disappeared into the city, a shadow that had appeared just when he needed it most. At the hospital, the boy was surrounded by doctors and nurses. Machines beeped and whirred. Monitors displayed numbers that seemed to matter more than the words anyone said. His parents arrived moments later, their faces pale with fear but quickly melting into relief when they saw him breathing, still alive. The boy tried to speak, tried to explain who had helped him, but the details were fuzzy. He could only remember a kind face, quick hands, and a voice that had sounded like a promise. That promise, though, stayed with him. It stayed in his chest, not the aching kind of chest, but the kind that held hope, courage, and the feeling that someone out there cared enough to step in when the world could have turned its back. Recovery wasn't easy. The doctors monitored him closely, adjusting medicines, checking his heart, and explaining the risks his condition carried. The boy endured days of needles, tests, and medication, sometimes in silence, sometimes crying quietly when his body hurt too much to stay strong. Through it all, his parents never left his side, and the memory of the stranger hovered in his mind, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest moments, someone could bring light. Weeks passed, and slowly he regained strength. He could move more, breathe easier, and even play short games with his sister in the living room again. The fear lingered, but it was now mixed with gratitude. He would never forget the stranger who had saved him, a person who had appeared from nowhere, acted without hesitation, and disappeared just as quickly. The boy thought about that moment often, wondering who the man was, what drove him to help a child he had never met. Those questions swirled in his mind, shaping his understanding of kindness, of courage, and of the power one person could have in another person's life. Even on ordinary days, he tried to carry that lesson. He helped his sister with her homework, shared his small snacks with friends, and always tried to be gentle with those who struggled, because he knew what it felt like to be in need. His heart, though physically weak, had grown stronger in ways medicine couldn't measure. And somewhere deep inside, he held a secret wish, a quiet hope that one day, he might meet the man who had saved him and finally say the words that had been stuck in his throat all those years. Thank you. The boy didn't know if he would ever see the stranger again. Life moved quickly around him, school, friends, hospital visits, and family responsibilities filling his days. But he carried the memory with him, a reminder that courage and kindness existed in the world, sometimes in the most unexpected people. And as he drifted off to sleep each night, he imagined that face, that reassuring voice, and he promised himself silently that if he ever got the chance, he would honor that kindness not just with words, but with actions that mattered. Because even at 7 years old, fragile as he was, the boy had learned something profound. The world could feel harsh, unfair, and heavy, but one act of love, one moment of courage from a stranger, could change a life forever, and that lesson would stay with him for the rest of his days. After that day in the park, life slowly began to change for the boy, though he didn't realize it at first. The memory of the stranger who had saved him stayed like a quiet echo in his heart, a reminder that someone cared enough to act when it mattered the most. The boy often thought about that moment. He remembered the stranger's calm voice, the steady hands that held him, and the way he had disappeared before anyone could even thank him properly. That memory became a gentle guide in his life, shaping the way he treated others, the way he dreamed, and the way he faced challenges. At home, things settled into a cautious rhythm. His mother still worked long hours and his father still drove his bus routes, but they made sure to spend every free moment with him. The house was filled with a quiet determination, doctor's appointments, medication schedules, and careful monitoring of his heart condition. The boy often felt exhausted, not just physically but emotionally, as if every moment carried the weight of his fragile body. Yet, there was a resilience growing inside him, fueled partly by his own desire to live fully and partly by the memory of the stranger's act of kindness. School became a different kind of challenge after that day. The boy returned with a newfound determination. Even though his heart sometimes forced him to sit out of physical activities, he threw himself into learning, reading, and helping others. He became known for his gentle demeanor, his willingness to listen, and his quiet intelligence. Teachers noticed his thoughtfulness, and classmates began to see him not as the sick boy who needed care, but as someone kind, considerate, and capable of empathy beyond his years. Despite the support of his family and the improvements in his condition after careful medical care, the boy knew life could be unpredictable. His heart, though healing, was still delicate. Each cough or sudden ache reminded him that he was different, but he didn't let that define him entirely. Instead, he focused on what he could do: drawing, reading stories of people who overcame challenges, helping his younger sister with homework, and even assisting neighbors with small tasks when he could. Every small act became a way of honoring the memory of the stranger who had helped him, without expecting anything in return. One quiet afternoon, as he rested on the small couch in their living room, he thought about the stranger again. He remembered how calm the man had been, how certain he was that everything would be okay. The boy couldn't understand why someone he didn't know would risk their own time and safety for him, but he knew it mattered more than words could describe. That memory became a source of inspiration. He promised himself that if he ever had the chance, he would find the stranger to say thank you, though he didn't know how he would manage that. For now, the memory was enough to make him want to be better, to grow stronger, and to make life meaningful despite the struggles he faced every day. His family noticed the change in him. His mother would sometimes find him sitting quietly, drawing pictures or writing in his notebook, lost in thought. She could see the determination in his eyes, the resolve to grow beyond the limitations his condition placed on him. His father, though often tired, noticed the boy's growing confidence, the way he reached out to help others even when it was inconvenient or tiring. The family began to understand that the boy's experiences, painful as they were, had shaped him into someone extraordinary. One day, while walking home from school, he saw a younger child struggling to carry a heavy backpack. Without hesitation, he ran over and helped, steadying the bag on the boy's shoulders. The child looked up at him with surprise and gratitude. "Thanks, Ian," he said, and the boy just smiled, a soft, understanding smile. In that moment, he felt something shift inside him, a quiet joy that came from helping someone else, even in a small way. It reminded him of how the stranger had helped him, and for the first time, he realized that kindness wasn't just about grand gestures, it was about the small, consistent ways people could lift each other up. Time passed, and the boy continued to grow, both physically and emotionally. The heart condition remained a challenge, but with careful management, he began to experience life in ways he had never thought possible. He played short games with his sister, joined reading clubs at school, and started to form friendships that felt genuine. While he still sometimes felt different, he no longer saw it as a limitation. He saw it as part of his story, part of what made him who he was. The boy also began to notice the impact of his actions on others. Small gestures like helping classmates with their homework or comforting a friend who was sad began to ripple through his community. People started to see him as someone dependable and compassionate, even if they didn't know the full story of the day in the park. And every time he saw someone smile because of something he had done, he felt a deep sense of connection to the stranger who had once given him that same feeling of hope and care. At night, he would often lie in bed, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, thinking about what the future might hold. He dreamed of traveling, helping others, and finding ways to make a difference. The stranger's act had planted a seed in his heart, a desire to be more than just a boy with a heart defect. He wanted to be someone who could change lives, even in small ways, just as his life had been changed. School projects became opportunities for him to explore ideas about helping others. He worked on presentations about community service, volunteered at small local events, and encouraged his friends to join him in acts of kindness. He found joy in seeing how small efforts could create big changes in people's lives, and all the while the image of the stranger lingered in his mind, not as a ghost of the past, but as a symbol of the potential for goodness in the world. One rainy afternoon, the boy was walking home with a friend when he spotted an elderly neighbor struggling to carry groceries up the stairs. Without thinking, he ran over to help, steadying the bags and making sure nothing fell. The neighbor looked at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Thank you, young man," she said. The boy smiled, feeling a warmth that was both familiar and comforting. In that moment, he realized that the lessons he had learned from the stranger's kindness were not just about gratitude, they were about action. Kindness required effort, and it often required putting someone else's needs before your own. As the boy continued to grow, he also became more curious about the stranger. He would ask his parents if they knew anyone who might have been at the park that day, though the answers were always the same. No, it was just someone passing by. He wondered about the man's life, his family, and what had made him act so quickly to save a child he didn't know. These questions stayed with him, sparking a quiet determination to one day find the stranger and express his gratitude properly. Despite his curiosity, he understood that life was not always about answers. Sometimes it was about carrying forward the lessons and the inspiration. He learned to focus on the present, to be mindful of the people around him, and to seize moments to make a difference no matter how small. The stranger's influence became a guiding light, encouraging him to be brave, compassionate, and thoughtful. His parents noticed these changes and felt a deep sense of pride. They had always known their son was special, but now they could see that his experiences had shaped him in ways that were remarkable. He was not just surviving, he was learning, growing, and becoming someone who could touch the lives of others. The boy's heart, fragile as it was physically, was strong in spirit. It was strong in empathy, courage, and hope. Over the years, the boy continued to build on these lessons. He spent more time helping neighbors, volunteering at school, and supporting his younger sister in every way he could. He learned that life was unpredictable and often unfair, but he also learned that small acts of kindness could have enormous power. Each day, he tried to live in a way that honored the memory of the stranger who had once saved him, knowing that one life could indeed change another. And so, the boy grew up carrying two things in his heart: the reality of his condition, which reminded him to be careful, patient, and resilient, and the memory of a stranger whose act of courage had shown him the beauty of human kindness. These two forces guided him, shaping the way he saw the world, interacted with others, and imagined the future. He learned that life's challenges did not define a person, but the way they responded to those challenges did. Even though he was still young, the boy began to understand the power of gratitude, courage, and empathy. He realized that he had the ability to make a difference, just like the stranger had made a difference in his life. And deep down, he knew that one day he would find the person who had saved him, not just to say thank you, but to share the impact of that single, life-changing moment. Time passed, and the boy grew into a teenager. He was taller now, his body stronger, though his heart still reminded him every day that he was not like other kids. Despite all the challenges, he had changed in ways that no medicine could measure. The experience of that day in the park, the memory of the stranger who had saved him, had left a mark on him that was deeper than anyone could see. It had made him kind, thoughtful, and determined to live life fully, even when it was difficult. School life had grown more complex as well. Teenagers could be harsh, but he had learned how to navigate the social world with a quiet confidence. Some classmates still whispered about his heart condition, but he no longer felt ashamed. He had grown into himself in a way that made him proud. He knew that his struggles were part of his story, not the whole story. He threw himself into his studies, into small acts of kindness, and into friendships that were genuine. Those friends learned to see him for who he was, not for what he couldn't do. His heart condition still demanded caution. Physical activities had to be measured, and sometimes he would tire quickly, gasping for breath after even short runs. But he had learned to find other ways to challenge himself. Reading, writing, drawing, and helping others became his outlets. He spent hours in the local library, absorbing stories of people who had faced adversity and triumphed. Each story inspired him, giving him hope and reminding him that life could be full of possibilities even for someone like him. He had also begun to notice the impact of his actions in small, quiet ways. When he helped a classmate with homework, the classmate smiled in a way that made his heart feel lighter. When he offered encouragement to a friend feeling down, he felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that he had made someone's day better. Each of these moments reminded him of the stranger, whose act of courage had changed the course of his life. He understood now more than ever that kindness was powerful, and that it could ripple through the world in ways one could not always see. The boy also began to dream more vividly. He imagined a life where he could travel, help people, and maybe even work in a field where he could save lives, just like the stranger had saved his. He wanted to make a difference, no matter how small. In his imagination, he pictured the day he would finally find the stranger to say thank you. That thought became a quiet motivation, pushing him to work harder in school, to be kinder, and to be more aware of the people around him. At home, life was a mixture of love, challenges, and routine. His mother continued to work long hours, and his father's bus routes kept him busy. Yet they always made time for him. Family dinners were moments of connection, laughter, and reassurance. Even his little sister, now older, became more understanding of his limits and more appreciative of his presence. He would help her with homework, read to her, or simply sit with her when she needed comfort. These moments strengthened his spirit and reminded him that even small actions could create lasting bonds. One day, as he walked home from school, he noticed a small boy struggling to carry a backpack, much too heavy for his size. Without hesitation, he ran over and helped steady the bag on the child's shoulders. "Thanks," the little boy said, looking up with surprise and relief. The teenager just smiled, feeling a warmth that was both familiar and comforting. He realized that helping others, even in small ways, brought a joy that he had never experienced before the day he was rescued. Each act of kindness became a reflection of the stranger's influence, a way to honor that life-changing moment in the park. He also started thinking more about the stranger, wondering who he was, what he did for work, and why he had acted without hesitation. He asked his parents if they knew anyone who might have been there, but no one did. The stranger had disappeared as quickly as he had appeared, leaving only the memory of his kindness behind. Despite the mystery, the boy didn't feel anger or frustration. Instead, he felt admiration and curiosity. He wanted to learn from the stranger, to understand what made someone brave enough to step in and help when it mattered most. As the years went by, the boy grew more aware of his own potential to make a difference. He joined community activities, volunteered at local events, and became known as someone reliable and thoughtful. Teachers admired his dedication, classmates appreciated his help, and neighbors began to notice the quiet strength in a boy who had once seemed fragile. He had transformed his struggles into a source of motivation, using his experiences to guide others and to create a better environment for those around him. Despite the progress, he never forgot the day he had been saved. Sometimes when he lay in bed at night, he would close his eyes and imagine the stranger's face, the steady hands, the reassuring voice. He would replay the moment over and over, feeling the gratitude that had never left him. It was a feeling that both comforted and motivated him, reminding him that life was fragile, precious, and worth living fully. His growing maturity also brought a stronger sense of empathy. He began to understand that everyone faced battles, some visible and some hidden. He listened more to his friends, offered help without being asked, and tried to create an atmosphere of support wherever he could. He learned that compassion was not about recognition but about genuine care. Each act of kindness, each small gesture, became a way to honor the stranger's influence even without ever meeting him again. One weekend, the teenager visited the park where it had all happened. The swings were old and squeaky, the grass patchy, but it still held the memory of that critical moment in his life. He sat on the swing, quietly rocking back and forth, remembering the fear, the pain, and the relief he had felt. He thought about how far he had come since that day, the surgeries, the recovery, the growth, and the ways he had learned to help others. The park felt different now, not as a place of fear, but as a symbol of hope, courage, and possibility. At school, he continued to excel, not just academically, but socially. He became a person others looked up to for support and guidance. His condition, once seen as a limitation, was now a testament to his resilience. He had learned to balance caution with courage, to respect his body while still striving to reach his goals. The lessons he had learned as a child had become the foundation of his character, shaping him into someone who could inspire others simply by living with purpose and kindness. The teenager also began to think seriously about the future. He imagined a career that involved helping people, maybe in medicine, community service, or education. He wanted to give back in a way that reflected the impact the stranger had on him. Every decision he made, every path he considered, seemed to carry a sense of responsibility, not just to himself but to the world. He knew that one life could make a difference, and he wanted to be that difference for others. Friendships deepened during this time. He connected with people who valued him for his personality, kindness, and intelligence rather than what he could or could not do physically. These relationships became a source of strength, support, and joy. The bonds he formed reflected the lessons he had learned about trust, compassion, and empathy. They were a living reminder that the world could be kind, just as the stranger had shown him all those years ago. Through it all, the idea of finding the stranger remained in the back of his mind. He didn't know how or when it would happen, but the desire to express his gratitude never faded. He imagined that meeting the man would not only bring closure but also inspire him further, to live a life full of kindness, courage, and purpose. The thought was comforting, motivating, and sometimes even thrilling. He began to understand that life was not about waiting for perfect moments, but about creating them. Every act of kindness he performed, every effort to help someone else became part of a larger story, a story that had started the day he was rescued in the park. He learned that gratitude could be expressed not only through words, but also through actions, through the way one lived their life. And so he carried the lessons of that day with him, silently vowing to honor the stranger by becoming a person worthy of the gift he had been given. As he approached the end of his teenage years, he began to feel more confident in his ability to navigate the world. His health, while still delicate, had improved with proper care and caution. His mind was sharp, his heart resilient, and his spirit full of hope. He knew that challenges would always come, but he also knew that he had the strength, courage, and empathy to face them. And in every choice, in every action, he carried the memory of the stranger, a constant reminder of the difference one person could make in another's life. By the time he reached young adulthood, the boy, now a young man, had grown into someone remarkably strong, not just physically but emotionally. His heart condition, while still part of his life, no longer defined him. It was a reminder of his resilience, of the struggles he had overcome, and of the life-saving kindness of a stranger years ago. That memory had followed him like a gentle shadow, guiding him in his decisions, his interactions with others, and the way he viewed the world. And now that memory had begun to take a new shape, a determination to find the stranger who had changed his life forever. The young man often thought about how impossible it might be. The stranger had disappeared that day, leaving no name, no contact, nothing but the memory of his calm voice and steady hands. He had no clues to follow, and yet the desire to find him burned brighter with every passing year. He wanted to say thank you, to show the man how much his single act of courage had meant, to explain how it had inspired the young man to grow, to help, and to live fully despite his challenges. The thought of finally meeting him was thrilling, almost like a dream he didn't want to wake from. He began with small steps. He asked neighbors if they had seen anyone unusual in the park that day, though the answers were always the same. No one remembered. He reached out to local community groups, describing the event in the hope someone might recognize the story. He posted on social media cautiously, careful not to reveal too much personal information, and waited, watching for any hint of recognition or guidance. Every small lead became a spark of hope, though most turned out to be dead ends. Despite the setbacks, he didn't lose hope. He understood that finding someone who had acted anonymously years ago would not be easy. But he also knew that patience and persistence could create opportunities where none seemed to exist. He spent long nights thinking, planning, and researching. He learned how to track small details, how to ask the right questions, and how to follow leads without giving up. Each step of the search became a lesson in resilience, mirroring the lessons he had learned through living with a fragile heart. The young man also realized that his search was not just about gratitude, it was about understanding the impact of a single act of kindness. He wanted to see for himself how a moment could ripple across years, how it could shape a life, and how it could inspire someone to grow into a better person. He knew that the stranger might never even remember the event, but that didn't matter. The memory itself had already created change. Still, he longed for a meeting, for the connection that would close a chapter and open another, full of recognition, respect, and shared understanding. As he continued his search, he faced the frustrations of unanswered questions. Leads that seemed promising often fizzled out. People he spoke to had no recollection, and sometimes the trail grew colder than ever. There were nights when he felt doubt creeping in, whispering that he might never find the person, that perhaps the stranger had moved far away, or that time had erased any chance of discovery. During these moments, he reminded himself of the courage he had learned from the stranger, the way the man had acted without hesitation, without expectation, and he resolved to continue, no matter the difficulty. He also leaned on the lessons of kindness he had learned along the way. Even while searching for the stranger, he made a point to help others. He volunteered at local community centers, assisted neighbors with errands, and offered support to friends and family whenever possible. These small acts of generosity were a way of honoring the memory of the man who had helped him. They reminded him that while he searched, he could also create positive impact, spreading the same spirit of selfless care that had once saved his life. Sometimes he would revisit the park where it had all happened. The swings were worn and squeaky, the grass patchy and uneven, but the memory of that day remained vivid. He could still feel the panic he had experienced, the pain, and the relief that had washed over him when the stranger appeared. Sitting there, he would imagine the man, picturing his calm expression, the hands that had steadied him and the voice that had reassured him. These moments strengthened his resolve, reinforcing the belief that some things in life, like courage, kindness, and gratitude, were worth pursuing, even against great odds. Through the years, he also began to document his search. He kept a journal noting each lead, each small success, and each setback. He reflected on the lessons he had learned through his own life, the importance of patience, the value of empathy, and the power of persistence. The journal became a record not just of a search for a person, but of a journey of growth and understanding. It reminded him that life was a series of steps, some challenging, some rewarding, and all meaningful in their own ways. Friends began to notice his determination. They saw the careful research, the thoughtful questions, and the small acts of kindness he continued to perform, and they admired his dedication. Some offered to help, suggesting leads or sharing contacts. Others simply supported him emotionally, listening to his hopes and frustrations without judgment. The young man appreciated the support, but he also knew that the search ultimately was his own journey. It was something he had to see through himself, just as he had faced his own challenges with courage and resilience. One day, he received a small piece of hope. A lead came from someone who had been in the area years ago, a person who remembered seeing a man helping a child in distress. The details were faint, the memory hazy, but it was enough to reignite his determination. He followed this lead carefully, contacting community groups, visiting neighborhoods, and asking questions in a respectful and patient way. Each interaction brought new information, small pieces of the puzzle, and slowly, the picture of the stranger began to take shape. With each passing week, he grew more aware of the lessons embedded in the search itself. The process required patience, humility, and an understanding that not all outcomes would be immediate or obvious. He realized that gratitude could exist without closure, and that sometimes the act of seeking could be as meaningful as the discovery itself. But the hope of meeting the stranger in person remained his guiding star, pushing him forward even when the trail seemed cold. During this time, he also reflected on his own growth. The boy who had once struggled to breathe, who had faced ridicule and fear, had become a young man capable of empathy, determination, and action. He understood that life's difficulties were not just obstacles. They were opportunities to learn, to grow, and to become stronger. His heart, though physically delicate, had grown resilient in ways that medicine could not measure. And he knew that the stranger's influence had played a crucial role in shaping that resilience. Even as the search continued, he did not let it overshadow his present life. He continued his education, pursued his interests, and nurtured relationships that mattered, but he carried the memory of the stranger with him in everything he did, a quiet reminder of the power of kindness and the importance of action. Each day was an opportunity to honor that memory, whether through helping others, learning, or simply living fully. Finally, after months of careful searching, following leads, and piecing together fragments of memory, the young man found a clue that felt promising. It was a small, seemingly insignificant detail, a location, a name, a connection, but it felt like the missing piece he had been seeking for years. His heart raced with excitement, hope, and a touch of nervousness. He knew he was close. After all this time, he was about to find the person who had changed his life in a single, unforgettable moment. The anticipation was overwhelming. He imagined the meeting in his mind countless times, the words he would say, the gratitude he would express, and the look of recognition on the stranger's face. He wondered if the man would remember him at all, if he would understand the impact of that single act. And yet he knew that it didn't matter entirely. Even if the stranger didn't remember, the young man had grown into a life shaped by courage, kindness, and hope. The search itself had taught him lessons as profound as the act that had saved him. With determination in his heart, he prepared to follow this lead. He checked every detail carefully, made plans for the meeting, and reminded himself to approach it with humility and patience. He understood that people's lives moved in ways that might not always align with his hopes, but he also trusted that persistence, guided by genuine gratitude, could create a meaningful encounter. As he stepped forward, ready to find the stranger who had once saved him, he carried not only hope but also a lifetime of lessons, the importance of kindness, the power of empathy, and the courage to act even when it is difficult. He knew that whatever happened next, his life had already been transformed. And the meeting, when it came, would be a celebration not just of the past but of the person he had become because of it. The day finally came. After years of searching, following leads, asking questions, and piecing together fragments of memory, the young man felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and anticipation. He had been preparing for this moment quietly, thinking about what he would say, how he would express the gratitude that had grown inside him over so many years, and how he would even know for sure that he had found the right person. The stranger had been just a fleeting figure in his life once, but now he felt as though the man had always been a part of him, guiding him quietly through each challenge, each act of kindness, each moment of growth. He arrived at the location indicated by his most recent lead. It was a small neighborhood, quiet and unassuming, nothing like the park where it had all begun, but somehow familiar. The young man walked slowly, taking in the sights, feeling the weight of the years of searching pressing on him, but also the lightness of hope that had been growing steadily inside him. Every step felt deliberate, each one bringing him closer to the person who had unknowingly shaped his life. Then, he saw him. The stranger, older now, perhaps in his 40s or 50s, with a calm demeanor and the kind of presence that made people feel safe. There was no doubt in his mind that this was the man. The heart that had been fragile as a child now pounded with emotion, not fear, but anticipation, gratitude, and awe. The young man felt his legs tremble slightly as he approached, unsure of how to begin but certain that he had to speak, to connect, to finally close the circle that had begun so many years ago. "Excuse me," he said softly, his voice slightly shaking. The stranger turned, surprised, but there was something in the young man's eyes, a spark of recognition, sincerity, and deep gratitude that caught his attention immediately. I don't know if you remember me, but years ago you saved my life in the park. I've been trying to find you ever since because I wanted to thank you." The stranger blinked, pausing for a moment as his memory stirred. I don't know if I remember exactly," he said cautiously, "but did it happen in the park? A boy collapsed?" The young man nodded, feeling a wave of relief. "Yes, that's right. That was me. You saved me." A silence fell between them, filled not with awkwardness but with weighty emotion. The young man felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, remembering the fear, the pain, and the relief he had felt all those years ago. He had carried that day inside him, nurturing it like a seed, letting it grow into something that shaped every act of kindness, every lesson in resilience, every moment of hope in his life. And now, standing before the man who had made it all possible, he finally had the chance to speak the words that had lived in his heart for so long. "Thank you," he said, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I don't know if I can ever fully explain it, but you saved my life. That day, it changed everything for me. It showed me that someone could care, that kindness could change a life, and it made me want to be better, to help others, to live fully. I've never forgotten you." The stranger looked at him, his expression softening. A mixture of humility, surprise, and something almost like pride appeared in his eyes. I didn't do anything extraordinary," he said quietly. "I just acted. I saw a child in danger and I did what I could. I never